Hi everyone. I think we've still got a couple of people joining, so I'll just give it a couple of minutes. I can see the participant list going up, but thank you for those that have already joined. And welcome to today's webinar. We'll go through things properly in a minute, but I'll just give it, like I say, just one more minute just while people are joining. Right, I think we probably need to start. I think we've got most participants now. So we'll crack on as there's quite a bit to cover today. As I say, thank you for everyone that's joined. Today's webinar is ultimately covering employment compliance. So we're going to run you through everything you kind of need to know, all the kind of key information, things you need to get in place when employing people. We're going to record the session, so all the recording will be available afterwards and the slides. So we'll send that out to everyone that's participated. Also, please feel free to put any questions in the chat feature, and we'll pick these up at the end. So we'll start off with introductions. With anticipating today's session will last about an hour. So, like I say, hopefully we will have time. Fingers crossed. As I say, there's a lot to cover, but we'll try and get a chance for Q&As at the end. So I'll start off introducing myself. I'm Paula. I work for Farnell Clarke. I'm a senior HR advisor, so I support all our clients with any sort of HR matters. That's either advisory, but also working on different packages and things with those. I'll hand over to Lauren.
Hi everybody, I'm Lauren, HR Director at Farnell Clarke, working alongside Paula, supporting a range of clients across the UK, working with small and medium businesses. HR is our passion. It's complex, notoriously so, the world of employment law. And the purpose of this session and what we love to do is to really simplify that down for the people that we work with, to help you work on what your objectives are, keep you safe as an employer, and essentially create the working environment that you want to for yourself and for your employees. We also work alongside a number of referral partners. One of these is the wonderful Factorial. I'll let Jack introduce himself.
Yeah, so lovely to be here. I'm Jack. I work over at Factorial HR, which is a HRAS solution so that you can get all the automation, all the guidelines in the background for everything we're going to be talking about today. I was on the sales segment initially, so started off on the SMB and then went to our enterprise segment. And now I'm on the partnerships after we got Microsoft Startup of the Year, and I get to work with lovely people like Paula in the past and Lauren now. So yeah, I'll be looking at this from a HRIS perspective, and I'll leave all the laws and the legislation towards the experts on the calls anyway.
Thanks, Jack. So this is briefly what I'm going to be covering today. As I say, there's a lot to get through. We'll go through the key compliance, employment law legislations, and that will cover areas like contracts, right to work checks, policies, rights and benefits, everything sort of like the key statutory minimum that people need to have in place. Then we'll hand over to Jack, who will deliver a lovely demo, and then we'll cover Q&As at the end. So as I say, feel free to pop anything as we go along in the chat, and we'll pick these up at the end. As there's quite a bit to cover, we're also, alongside that, there's going to be a lot of changes coming up in the UK in the next kind of couple of years. So we're going to touch on them briefly as well. At Farnell Clarke, myself and Lauren also offer free 30-minute consultation with anyone. So if anyone is interested in that, obviously we can sort of delve a little bit deeper because we're aware that we're kind of going to go through things very briefly for you. We're happy to arrange that after today's session as well. Right, so we'll crack on and get started. So we've included this slide mainly, we're not going to go through all the like legislations and all of these, but these are just basically to give you an overview of how many legislations there are in place in the UK that obviously affects employment. That there is tons, and like I say, these are all massive documents. We're giving you the overview here so that you don't have to necessarily read through all of them. And there's going to be lots of changes affecting a lot of these over the next couple of years with the sort of new UK government. I will hand over to Lauren.
So Here we go. So I don't think anybody can kind of escape the sort of the recent news over the last month or so with our new Labour government as part of the Make Work Pay plan. In October, they published the Employment Rights Bill, which is rather long-winded, 156 pages to get through, which will simplify as we move through this. There's 28 reforms that are proposed. What we don't currently have, and it's the question that clients ask all the time: when are these going to be implemented? We know with some areas, but for example, the main change that's been proposed is around implementing day one rights, which I'll talk about a little later on. Essentially, as we all know, full employment rights don't kick in until a member of staff has worked with you for 2 years. Obviously, that can make it easier to exit people as needed, without following the more rigorous processes. Day one rights are going to kick in likely October next year, or even April 2026. So that 2-year rule will be essentially scrapped. There's a number of other sort of key areas. Some are already part implemented, and we'll chat through those as we go through each of the areas on compliance for you, and just try and make it as undaunting as possible.
Thank you. So we'll start off with recruitment and hiring. Obviously, some of you might be hiring for the first time, might be sort of expanding your company, or you might be just growing your teams. It's essentially good to get things right from the start when taking on people. One of the main things, if you're employing people for the first time, to get in place is employers' liability insurance. This is a legal requirement that all companies have to have when employing anyone. It kind of covers you in case there's kind of future claims. It just gives you a little bit of protection, and can help towards like legal costs, things like that. And as I say, it is a legal requirement for every company employing anyone to have that in place. Other things to sort of bear in mind when taking on anyone is having things like job descriptions or outlining what's involved in each job. This can obviously help, certainly in sort of future, with things like probations, making sure people are basically doing everything that you're expecting them to do. It can kind of help with performance going forward and things like that. Advertising the roles, ensuring that you're following like fair processes when advertising, avoiding kind of using certain language, like, for example, this is a very broad example, but things like looking for young employees, because, you know, say you want a driver and you don't want to be discriminating against certain things. So making them very sort of unbiased, and giving everyone a kind of fair opportunity. And the same with kind of shortlisting and interviews. You can kind of put in certain processes where either you're not looking at people's names, certain things, you're sort of more looking at actually the skills they've got and could they do the role. So there's certain things that you can kind of put in place just to make sure that you're following a fair process when recruiting. And once you've got to the stage of taking anyone on, again, a legal compliance is making sure all your employees complete a right to work check in the UK so that they've got that ability to work for you. And that needs to be done for all your employees.
I think just one thing to follow up on that. It is important to have the sort of the processes and the documentation in place. If you aren't sure that you've got that, one of the services that we do offer is a check through, and we can provide templates and guidance around recruitment. Moving on to potential changes, as I touched on, again, we don't know the timeframes for this, but it is imminent, that basic rights will kick in from day one. So as soon as you've recruited somebody, they will have protection from unfair dismissal, There are additional rights, again, that sort of tie into this. So there'll be additional extensions to paternity, parental, and bereavement leave, particularly around antenatal bereavement and parental bereavement for the non-carrying partner, which could come in as soon as April this year. In terms of impact of that, the government is looking at, and there's debate going on and consultation right now around what that means in terms of statutory probation periods. So most companies, I would assume, a lot of yourselves will have a standard probation. Typically, that's 3 to 6 months. The government is looking at putting in a 9-month statutory probation period. The emphasis really and sort of things to be thinking about are, when you have a new starter, what are you doing to manage their performance from day one? Are you carrying out regular check-ins and reviews? It always sort of amazes me the number of clients that we work with or have worked with that don't necessarily manage and set those expectations from day one, and that's sometimes a training thing. It's also just having the right policies and processes in place, which again is something that we can help with. It also, you know, it stresses the importance of getting that recruitment process right, making sure that you're rigorous in terms of asking the right questions, training your managers to interview effectively, so that ultimately this basic rights from day one, you're not in that position, you're getting the right people in place.
Thank you. So once you've got those people in place, obviously there's certain things you need to make sure, again, you've got in place once they start. Everyone needs written statement of employment, terms and conditions, contract, and that's either on or before their start date. So that should be issued to them well in advance of them actually turning up at your company and starting to do the work. There's key information in the UK that has to legally be included in a contract. And again, that has to be given to them before they start. It's things like I've said, the job description, but also job titles, salary details, holiday. It's quite an intensive list. And this is another area, again, we can offer support with. We have worked with various clients where we've reviewed their existing contracts, making sure they're still compliant. This is an area that, again, can change quite frequently. It's another employment law thing that's sort of constantly reviewed and can have changes, and it is something we can either, if you haven't got them in place, provide templates for, or help you sort of set up, customize them to what you offer. We can cover what's statutory required, but also if you're offering additional things on top of that. And as I say, we can review kind of current contracts and stuff as well. The other things that every company needs in place is a workplace pension scheme. Even if people have their own setup, so say even if you take on 1 or 2 people and you know they've got a private pension, you still have to have a scheme in place to ensure compliance. This is to cover auto-enrolment. So it's part of the kind of government's making sure people are looking forward in their ways of life. So they're sort of getting that in place and making sure people are prepared for that stage of their life. And the other side of that is re-enrolment. So every 3 years, people need to be re-enrolled in the scheme. Again, if they have their own things in place, they can opt out, but you have to make sure you're following that process and that kind of re-enrolment schemes. We do have a payroll team, and they cover a lot of the pension sort of setup, things like that. They can kind of review what you've got in place. They also, if you're one of our payroll clients, cover all the re-enrolment and things like that, to take that kind of pressure off you having to think, when did that employee enroll and things like that. I believe systems like Factorial can also help with that in terms of sort of reminding you when those sort of processes come up as well.
Okay, so when it comes to contracts, the sort of the key element of the new reforms is the ban or look to reduce significantly 0 hours contracts, which are in some areas viewed as exploitative. Again, sort of in terms of real life experience with clients, actually 0 hours contracts can work quite well, both for the employee and the employer. So whilst it's sort of described as a ban on 0 hours contracts, there is a caveat with that, which is unless the employee wants that to be the case. We work with a number of clients who you know, you see it in the particularly the Generation Z. There's much more want and use of 0 hours contracts and that flexibility that it offers both employers and employees. Regardless of how it's actually applied, there is going to be a push on reducing 0 hours contracts, particularly around giving a certain number of guaranteed hours. So for companies who work particularly in sort of hospitality, this is something that's really important. And I think once we know more around it, we're going to do a very specific session on how, you know, what you need to be doing and how we can support. One thing with contracts, obviously a contract is a legally binding term, and whilst going back to sort of the day one rights that an employee has or will have around being able to claim unfair dismissal, one thing that you do need to be aware of is from day one, currently an employee, you've got to be careful around not breaching any of the terms of the contract. The contract is the most important thing to get right and accurate. Again, we support with reviewing contracts. It's one of our bread and butters, as I like to call it. It's really important to get your house in order with them. When you are changing contractual terms, and one of the most recent things has been the overruling around holiday pay, which we'll touch on a bit later. But when you are changing contracts, there is a process that you need to follow around consulting, either individually with a member of your team, or collectively, depending on those changes. And it's really important as an employer that you're aware of that requirement to consult for any changes that are going to be made. Okay.
Thank you. So following on from contracts, policies is another key thing you have to get in place for compliance. There are certain policies you have to provide and again have in place. A lot of these again are to set out your processes, your procedures with different things. So these are kind of the key ones that the government say you absolutely have to include, which is grievance and disciplinary, obviously health and safety, data protection and equal opportunities. Again, we do provide templates for these and have again worked with several clients to kind of review their policies that they already have. And again, these are ones that can change quite regularly. The government obviously constantly review, and this is sort of some of the areas that they're likely to bring in future changes and things like that. Having these in place, like for all employees, can help with that transparency, just so that you know you're following those fair processes. So it can help you as an employer, but also just outline the details to the employees of what's anticipated, what's expected. They know what's in place. The other key with policies is making sure they're very accessible. So people know from day one when they start how to access policies and any procedures within the company. Again, software like Factorial can help with that because they'll have those policies in a place which is accessible to your employees. But just making sure people know where they are. These are the bare minimum that you have to have, but there's a lot of other policies that it's good practice to include. Like I say, again, we cover a lot of these in our sort of template packages and stuff. And some additional policies will be more relevant to some companies and certain industries than others. So again, it's kind of about seeing what's good for your organisation and what's relevant, really.
Okay, again, in terms of the employment rights, put my teeth back in, Act, the likely and most sort of important changes to policies that we're going to see. And again, huge number of queries around this is around absence policies. So it's particularly sickness absence. So I'm sure everybody's heard that there's planned changes to statutory sick pay. Currently, statutory sick pay kicks in on day 4 of the consecutive day 4 of somebody being off sick. This is going to be changed. Again, the key question is when. It could be as early as April 2025 to a day 1 where statutory sick pay comes in. There's also currently a lower earnings threshold, which is £123 a week, and that's being removed as well. So currently, the way that SSP works, there's over 1.2 million workers in the UK who will never get that SSP. 70% of those are female employees, which is a key driver behind the changes to the SSP rules. Obviously important to be able to record absences and also look at how you're managing. We've seen it, there's trends over the last year or so. Maybe it's we always refer back to COVID, but sort of a post-COVID world, where the rates of sickness are increasing significantly across pretty much every industry. So it's really important to know where you've got triggers, how you're managing sickness, and again, we've got templates and advice to support with that.
So these are some of the key kind of rights and benefits. Obviously, you need to ensure salaries and everyone you employ is at national minimum wage. This is reviewed every April, so potentially has changes every April. But the other thing to be aware of, and we've worked with clients on this before, is there are age thresholds. So say someone turns 21, occasionally it can be missed that someone's changed 21 and the salary hasn't been increased and things like that. So you do need to kind of constantly review salaries, again, making sure that you're not going below those national minimum wages, especially for sort of like the different age brackets and things like that. Again, if you are a payroll client or want to sort of speak to our payroll team, it is something that they will kind of monitor for people. So they will keep an eye on things like that for you, especially in terms of someone, say, turning age 21, they'll kind of do a review to check that you're still compliant on national minimum wage. And again, it's something that it's reviewed every April and changes every April. So there is that as well. Working hours. So we have the working times regulations in the UK. Again, there's different age brackets. So if you're under 18, you shouldn't be working more than 40 hours a week. If you're over 18, you shouldn't be working more than 48 hours a week. There is the 48-hour opt-out. So if people choose to work more hours than 48, you need to make sure they're basically signing a declaration to say, I actually want to work more than 48 hours a week. But within that comes a lot of sort of well-being, health and safety and things like that, ensuring people have regular rest breaks. Anyone working over 6 hours a day should have a minimum of like 20-minute break. That can be unpaid, but you need to make sure people are having those regular breaks. There's also things in terms of drivers. There's a lot more kind of regulation around drivers in terms of the breaks they have to have when driving and how much of a gap they have to have. So say they finish a shift on a certain day, they need a certain rest period before they can then start another shift and areas like that. And that's another area we've kind of worked with different clients, different businesses to make sure that they've got policies around that in place, that they know that the employees know what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing, and that they can make sure they're sort of covering the relevant rest periods and things like that. Holiday entitlement and holiday pay. This is a massive area. It changed a lot in April. Again, it's about making sure people are getting what they're entitled to. So either the minimum entitlement to holiday, which currently in the UK for like a full-time employee is 28 days, which is like 5.6 weeks. That's based on a 5-day week, like working week. That can include bank holidays. So that's like kind of like minimum someone has to have. The other side of that, so as well as ensuring people are taking 28 days leave if they're a full-time employee, is holiday pay, which is slightly different because people are obviously entitled to be paid when they are off. But holiday pay, the major changes that came in this year was the way things are calculated. So if you've got people earning like regular commission, regular bonus payments, things like that, it all needs to come in line with when they have a day off. They need to still have the right to a percentage of what they've kind of accrued with either their commission, like I say, regular bonuses and stuff like that. It can become quite complicated. Again, our payroll team do provide guidance around this. They're very good at looking at, right, what's the best for this company in terms of the different sort of structures you might have. If you have people on like a regular hours, you can now apply a rolled up rate of holiday pay. So they're not necessarily taking holiday. They still need to be having a break. So they still shouldn't be working like 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. But their pay is basically paid as and when they earn. So for every hour they work, they would get a rolled up rate of holiday pay on top of that. The idea around that is that they should really be putting that money aside for when they do need to take a break. That's the kind of sort of caveat around that. Other leave, so we've sort of touched upon obviously statutory sick pay, but the other things, which is the sort of statutory minimum, is things like maternity, paternity, adoption, shared parental, all those kind of leaves as well. There is some additional unpaid leave, which is things like carers leave. And again, we've worked with lots of companies to sort of make sure they're compliant on all these areas, helped again get sort of the relevant policies in place, so things like parental policies in place to make sure that again employees know what they're entitled to, and companies can sort of almost pre-plan for any sort of eventualities that might come up.
Okay. So changes coming up. Obviously, I've touched on statutory sick pay, so I'm not going to labour that point. National minimum wage is obviously reviewed yearly. So from April 2025, some key figures for you. So national minimum wage will increase to £12.21. Big increases that we're seeing this year for over 21s. £10 for 18 to 20-year-olds and £7.55, which is up from £6.40. So big increase for 16 to 17-year-olds and apprentices. A number of clients that we're speaking to at the moment are obviously concerned around this. You know, increasing national minimum wage, plus, as we all know, there's the increase in national insurance contributions. If you haven't already, it is worth taking the time to start looking at what impact that's going to have on your overall staff costs and running costs. We're already speaking to clients to help in terms of projecting what that will look like, and how, you know, a lot of companies are going to struggle. I think the hashtag around it is survive25, which is caused me probably far too much amusement, but it is catchy. What we, you know, companies are looking at what that means in terms of salaries, not just for staff who are on national minimum wage, but then obviously, you know, you've got the next tier up. So what does that mean? Some companies are looking at sort of shrinking their hierarchies, so there's less graduation. But then you've got to think about retention strategies with that. So what else can you be doing to engage the staff that you have? You know, money is essentially going to be tighter for the vast majority of companies next year. So thinking ahead and strategizing, okay, what does this mean in terms of how we get the best efficiencies out of people? Are we getting the most out of the roles? Do we need to review structure? For me, is the most important thing that any company can be doing right now. And again, you know, this is the kind of thing that we can help support and advise and offer guidance with. Flexible working. I mean, this came into fruition in April this year, the new flexible working rights. So it's a day one right for anybody that you employ. Best advice around that is to have a formal process. There's a lot of rules and regulations around it. Again, these are going to get stronger, so flexible working will become the default and the norm, which we've started to get used to again in the sort of post-COVID world. But there is a knock-on impact to companies, especially, you know, if you're offering shift work, and the impact of that. Final thing around this is time off following loss. Again, I touched on this earlier, what we are expecting in April. And again, the sort of the devil's in the detail with all of this. But one to look out for is the neonatal care leave. So very, very sensitive subject. But for parents who have a baby that has to go into neonatal care, the government is looking at adding on to maternity and potentially paternity leave. The rumour is that's going to be up to 12 weeks additional. That's certainly the leave aspect. It may also include the pay aspect, which we'd expect to be in line with maternity pay and paternity pay. So again, one to watch out for as and when these updates are in place. Keep an eye. We do on the FC website, we do blog regularly to give the really key information, just to keep all our clients informed and aware.
Thank you. So this is the kind of final section that we'll quickly cover. As I say, we've kind of bulldozed through these a little bit as there was quite a bit to cover. This is really mainly about making sure you've got your processes in place. So termination and record keeping. So any sort of, obviously we've touched on what you need for new starters, everything else, employing people, but it's also good to kind of preempt anyone leaving the company. So anyone that might be resigning. It's again making sure that you're legally compliant when someone leaves the company. So calculating everything they're owed in terms of their pay, salary, even things like making sure they're taking either all their holiday that they've accrued to that date, or that you're going to be paying them for any holiday that they've accrued to that date if there isn't time to kind of take it. And even considering things like exit interviews, why are people leaving the company, things like that can just sort of help you going forward. So just having those kind of processes in place, making sure that you know in advance what's kind of needed. Again, even things like notice period. When you're setting up the contracts of employment, it's good to sort of preempt what you're kind of setting as notice periods for people, how much they have to give you, but also how much they would be expected to receive from you, whether that's the kind of statutory minimum or whether you enhance that to give people a bit more notice and things like that. Again, it's a kind of area that we can support with and look at and advise on what's kind of best fit for your kind of company. and it's similar to like dismissal and redundancy. Again, there's set processes that you need to follow. With dismissal, you've got to have justified reasons for dismissing someone. You should have followed a process through prior to getting to the sort of dismissal stage. And again, your policies and procedures and getting those in place can really help when it comes to those stages. I mean, these are the kind of final stages, and you always hope you won't have to get to that stage in a company, but getting everything in line beforehand can just help when it comes to any sort of potential issues, really. Redundancy, we've added on here as well, because again, there's set processes to follow, a little bit like if you're changing someone's terms and conditions. There's certain consultation that you need to do. There has to be justified reasons for making redundancies. These can be justified business reasons, but it's again just making sure that you followed that you're avoiding any sort of potential claims in the future, and treating people fairly, really, making sure you're going through those processes. And finally, just to sort of say, making sure you're keeping all your records in place of everything, even for like data protection and stuff like that, retention schedules, things like that, how long you keep employee data, being transparent with people on what you're keeping, and for your own point of view, keeping like records of what's happened, especially in cases of dismissal, redundancy, can just help, should there be any potential issues, to show that you've followed those processes and that you've done everything you needed to have done. I'm not going to go too much more into that because I'm aware that time's ticking quite quickly. So we like I say, we've blown through that all very quickly. We are happy to do a sort of follow-up 30-minute free call with anyone that's sort of interested in discussing any areas or how we could sort of potentially support. These are the sort of HR services that we provide. So we do provide advisory services, either on an ad hoc basis, as and when like there's a potential issue or something like that. We can also work with like project work, as we've said, on reviewing policies, contracts, areas like that. We also offer HR advisory on a retained basis, where you would have a dedicated advisor. So they get to know your company, and this can be done on a sort of set amount of hours, a month, a week, whatever you kind of need. But we're sort of on hand for any issues, or to sort of basically keep you updated with any changes and offer that advice. We've mentioned as well, we have our template packages. These can all be purchased and downloaded via our website. Again, if anyone sort of wants more information on any of this, just get in touch. We also have payroll services. So again, like we've said sort of throughout, they can help with compliance. They can run all the payroll services for you, making sure minimum wage, statutory sick pay, all those things are kind of covered for you, pension enrollment, stuff like that. And then obviously we partner with HR technology, which will bring me on to Jack to deliver his demo, which can just assist making sure that either you've got everything in place, and it can just help with all your processes. But I'll let Jack tell you more about that. One final thing from me is, after this session, as well as sort of giving you the slides and the video recording, we will send you a free compliance checklist. So it will cover everything that we've gone through today, and it is literally just a checklist for you to kind of go, yes, we've got this in place. Actually, not sure we've got this, but and then, like I say, happy to have a sort of follow-up call with you just to sort of discuss any needs you might have. I think that now brings me over to hand over to Jack.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, super interesting. I think there's obviously a lot to digest there, isn't there? One thing that's really good about getting a HR system in place is that it's going to help underpin a lot of those cases we talked about, with the automation and the compliance storage in the background. So I'm sure no one wants to be spending the days doing 52-week rolling calculations of any sick leave, any holiday pay, and doing all these bits and bobs in the background. One thing that having a HR platform in place does, be it Factorial or be it another provider that you're looking into, is it'll help create that underpinning where it just makes things a bit easier for you to manage, especially if you're wearing multiple hats there. Also, I've done here is I've pinpointed a few of those legislations that we've talked about there at the start, some of the main ones really that we're adhering to. I won't hop through them all, but I've just added a little bit underneath of how having a system in place can help you automate that in the background. So if I just zoom into one here, for example, so that we can pinpoint that without boring you to death, maybe. But if we hop in the maternity and parental leave regulation, so I'm just going to read verbatim an extract here. Employees with at least 1 year's continuous service are entitled to unpaid parental leave for their child. Each parent can take up to 18 weeks of parental leave up to the 18th birthday. Leave must be taken in blocks of 1 week unless there's disabilities where we can shorten that. And then there's a maximum of 4 weeks per year that can be taken per child. So there's quite a lot to digest there, especially if you're managing that ad hoc. If someone comes up to you and starts asking how you're starting to manage those regulations and getting those things in place. If you have things on a basis where you're storing this in paper, or maybe you're relying on Google Sheets or whatever it might be to manage all of this, you're missing out on that automation in the background that can just give them that visibility at a glance where they can see their leave entitlement, for example. You've already set up all the regulations in the background on if it's a paid or unpaid leave, if they need to take a week minimum whenever they're requesting any of that to you. So you know that when they come through that leave request for you on a platform, it's 2 clicks for you to just hop on that, approve or reject, and all of the rules and the bits and bobs are done in the background for you. Same thing for if we zone into like a working time regulation here, where you've got your shift management alerts. Maybe you have an under 18 who's got to work a 40-hour week. You're doing your shift planning, having something there where it's easy to visualize if we're hopping over those allocations, and also a platform in which we can trigger that document that maybe we've loaded on as a template from Farnell or wherever else, so that we can then add that e-signature towards it and keep that all in one centralized place, so that if anyone queries anything, if anyone's looking into you, you have all of that background here in a traceable log of everything that's happened, everything that we had in place when all of that was triggered. If you can just hop through to that next slide there, Paula. Right. So yeah, then just pinpointed a few things out on the potential changes that are coming through whenever that might be it October or be it April or whenever else. One of the main things, just to zoom in here, is things like your statutory probation period. So that's going to help you out, especially if there is the enhanced protection from day one there. What having a system in place there will do as well is you'll have those triggers of when you've got to do everything. So before they come on board, you have the trigger of doing your right to work check, when they come on board to upload certain documentation, to complete your health and safety quiz, whatever it might be when they first come on board, and then triggering it so that after 3 months, you've got a probationary period review. After 6 months, you've got one. After 9 months, you've got a reminder for if you're changing the compensation plan when they move forward to full-time employment, or if you are having it where we're letting go of that employee for whatever reason, you've got a full backing behind you and a full log of everything that's happened over that period, so that if someone queries that or you get called for a case for whatever reason, you've got that full back in there to be able to look back on and go, look, we did X, Y, and Z. Employee was perhaps falling short in this area. This was the reasons for doing so. And there's no query in that just because it's all in writing and it's all recorded relevant towards the correct dates. What I'll do, because I know we've been staring at a presentation for quite a while, is I'll hop into Factorial here and give a little demo. I would say that regardless of what provider you're going with, if it's Factorial or someone else, I would really encourage that you have a look at getting a platform in place, just because it really is going to help you with a lot of those automations. And we're not stupid. There's alternatives to Factorial there as well. So I'd always recommend to have a little look around and see what suits you and how you work. Great. So I hope everyone can see my screen there. But yeah, welcome to Factorial. This is what everyone sees when they enter the desktop version of the platform. First thing of note is that everything's going to follow through towards a mobile application as well. So if you think of all your time and attendance management, your performance management, maybe the employee self-service on updating some of their individual information, for example, that's going to notify you, all of that's accessible on the go for if we're working in industries like hospitalities and stuff like that here as well. What everyone sees, so everyone has access and self-service towards this use section here. So this is where they can see all of their time off allowances, for example, over a cycle. They can see the trainings that they've got and all the certifications there, how they're doing with any of their performance, as well as things like the bits and bobs of the policies that maybe you've worked with Farnell or you've uploaded there yourself on the different compliance side of things as well. This company section here is for you as an admin to be able to manage everything else. So you've got everything collated for all the employees. And if you're a bit of a larger company and you've got some delegation to like line managers there, we can also have restrictive views where you have the line manager able to see their own team, for example, so that they can take some of the workload here as well, especially if you're wearing quite a few hats there as the business owner. So I'm not going to hop through this whole first screen, just aware of the time here, but what I would say is that we can chop and change this view. I'm looking at this from like a super admin view. So I've got access to everything across the company. I've got all the bells and whistles. Maybe a ground level employee, you literally just want them to see this inbox here of the tasks that they have to do, and maybe the absences in their team so that they can see who's not in, for example, on a certain day. But you want to restrict access to everything else. That's possible. And I'd encourage you to ask all the different providers you're looking into that that's possible, because we want to make sure that we get as much uptake as possible whenever we're introducing that. On that strain of thought, this inbox here, so the key directive in Factorial's development team is that it should be a maximum of 2 clicks for an end user to navigate the platform. So if you're starting to introduce the new technology, maybe you've got a varying technical capability perhaps in your company that's making you a bit wary of that, or maybe you have younger employees who are somewhat reticent sometimes to log onto an employee platform for the company. This is where we keep it as simple as possible so that it's as easy as possible to get that data in the first place. So if I hop through, for example, like an equipment usage agreement, or we talked about different employee handbooks, policies, health and safety regulations, if they've got to hop in and sign this, it's 1 click through, secure space with a legally binding signature, add the squiggle, hops through directly to their documents. If there's any approvals on here, maybe I'm a manager, I've got to approve a time off request, an overtime request, for example, maybe a training requisition. 1 click through, approve or reject on the information, and then it's submitted and tracked on the platform. Same thing for any onboarding tasks that I've got to do on both sides, the employee and the manager, and stays concurrent for things like performance reviews that we're doing through the platform as well. So it should be as simple as possible, really, for you to engage with. Again, just a note before I hop into any of the specifics, this is all going to be GDPR compliant, and then you should always be looking at the security certificates as well of any of the providers that you look into, because that's how you're making sure that if you do say, look here, I've got it on this platform, there's no way there's any loopholes in there where maybe the data wasn't stored in the right way, or there's bits and bobs on compliance that could get brought up. Now, it's quite a wide platform. You're going to be able to take different modules here, so you don't need to move forward with the full breadth of this if some of this doesn't look relevant towards you. But I'm just going to zone in on a few of these really quickly in the next 10 minutes or so that you get an idea. But through your recruitment, we talked about the importance of getting everything right from the very first touch point so that maybe we avoid these issues with the 9-month probation periods, etc. in the first place. What's going to happen here is you're going to be able to have your different job advertisements on the platform. You can link them up towards a jobs page on your website where you've got that organic recruitment, or we can also have it where it's shooting out to the different relevant platforms that you're using. So maybe you've got LinkedIn, Indeed, maybe you've got a really specific job board that you're just importing on here and you can see them collate on the platform. That's really good because under your insights here, you're going to get to see where everyone's coming from, where you're getting the most look, but also you're going to have all the backing for anything like your diversity, your equality, your inclusion metrics that we talked about on some of that legislation earlier as well to have to hand. If I hop through one of those job openings, let's say my bar supervisor, I saw a question that went in on hospitality earlier, so we'll make it a bit specific. First things first, it's going to show you candidates and it's going to pull a best match towards the job description that we've sorted at the start. There's a bit of generative AI here, conscious of Farnell's talk there, that there's a real focus on this to make sure that this is neutral language, that this isn't leading in any way. I'd always recommend you hop back through with an expert or with your own internal HR team as well to check these to make sure that nothing can get brought back towards you. And then we've got the hiring pipeline where we can automate the different things that are happening in each step. So maybe let's say you've got to do a right to work at some step. Maybe we've got the offer letter and we're having it so that we've got these actions where that's just going to shoot out automatically. So you're not going to have to worry about any of that in the background too. So I'm just going to hop back in towards this job here really quick. Oops. The joys of sharing my my demo account with the rest of my team. So sometimes people have a little play around in the background. So for example, Joe Gardner here is going to pull an AI summary of all of the answers to the questions. We can also build in things like an automatic disqualification on if they don't have a right to work, if they don't have X, Y, and Z qualification, so that you get rid of that headache. And then underneath this files section here, we're going to see all of the relevant information like the CRB checks, the forklift drivers, whatever they've uploaded when they first come on board. Tags is automatically going to pull these things as well using the AI. So if maybe it wasn't a good fit for this job, but later down the line, I know that to be compliant for a certain job opening, I need X, Y, and Z qualifications for it. I can just filter down that pool and I'm going to see those candidates there as well, compliant with GDPR storage. Move them through towards offer, shoot out the offer letter. Let's say they've accepted it, all's well and good. They're hired and they start the onboarding. Onboarding is just going to automate all those steps that we talked about. So let's say I've got different steps for the different departments where there's different information upload or whatever it might be. Split those out, but the long and short of it is basically we have these steps that trigger off the contract start date or trial periods, for example. And this is where you can make sure that all of those bases are covered when we talk about that compliance information that we're taking at the start, but also as time goes on. So for example, maybe I want them to sign X, Y, and Z policy agreement. Maybe I want them to complete this health and safety survey, for example, when they first come on board. I want them to upload their personal information on disabilities, or maybe if I need to purchase PPE legally for them, I need to have that stored so I can run it through the purchasing. This is where we can capture all of that on the employee side, but also on your management side to make sure that we're not maybe dropping any balls when we've got a lot going on. Let's say IT called in to prepare the IT equipment and do a little log against the individual, maybe HR to do X, Y, and Z holiday policy in the background. So basically it all shoots out as one, really simple from the front end. X, Y, and Z tasks pending to do within your inbox here. I just have to click through on this. I've got all the due dates, who they're for. If I click in, I see all the information. I can tick them off as I go along. I can also hop into these two and say, oh, it's missing blah, blah, blah. Can you please do it from XYZ department? And that's going to give them a notification there as well to hop in. From the employee point of view, aware that we might even be stretching it there sometimes on getting new joiners to engage with a new platform. What we do is we just keep it really simple with something called a welcome space. Most HR platforms worth their salt should have this. So again, I'd recommend you checking this out whenever you're going through any providers. This is just one that we did for a client here through the mobile app where it's like a limited space. Upload the rest of that contract information that's missing. As soon as that's done, trigger in another one to sign the contract, for example. As soon as that's done, giving you full access towards the platform. Right. As soon as everything's uploaded, underneath your employee directory here, you're going to have all of your employees stored. Let's say I pick on Buzz here. Everything that's relevant towards Buzz with his life cycle with you is going to be stored against this profile. So if anything does get queried, you can just hop in here automatically, see the time off allocation of what they've taken over this year. You can see all the personal information, maybe anything like your emergency contacts that you've got to store on legally, maybe your percentage of disability, for example, and how that's getting built in, as well as your industry specific requirements that we can help you build in alongside Farnell Clarke and whoever else here too. Imagine you've got certain expiry dates on documentation, for example, you want to pull the triggers on 3 months before renewal or 1 month before renewal, etc. Contracts is where we're going to store everything like your pension deductions for that individual as well. Anything like the compensation schemes that we've got them on, all the supplements that they have access towards, as well as those work schedules too, so that we can build all of that in towards the payroll automatically, so that you're not having to do all the calculations throughout the month or weekly, bi-weekly, however you do it, so that it just automatically gets built in towards those different flows for you, rather than you having to interfere with any of that. And then the documentation. So this is where they can upload their different bits and bobs on their, let's say, training certificates, for example, and then I can report on it once they've uploaded any of those files on the expiry dates and things like that. Let's say they want to view their payslip because they're querying a salary, for example. They're able to just hop through here and just see the payslip directly through the platform. But also what this is going to do is, as an admin, it's going to give you the flexibility to build in these different documents we talked about from the very first moment that they come on board. So I've got my templates here, like an equipment usage agreement. I can just store that on the platform after working with Farnell Clarke. have that document here with the different variable fields. So things like the names, the ID numbers, that kind of thing, that's just automatically going to fill depending on the person that I'm sending this to. And that's just going to get shut off in the onboarding workflows and trigger wherever it might be to stop you from having to worry about anything like that in the first place. You're just going to get a tracker on your side of when it's been done. You can shoot out those reminders ad hoc. So basically it's one less headache for you on that side as well. Now, conscious of the time here and that we've talked to everyone a lot, I'm not going to hop into too much detail on the other areas. One thing that I will say is there's a lot of stuff on here, like your compliant whistleblower channel for your anonymous case management. Maybe in your performance, you want the audit log of how you've done the action plans and that you've adhered to listening to employees' talking points, that kind of thing on the platform. Maybe you want to hop in your goals and the OKRs to see if people are on track and have that back in for if people maybe haven't met it by the end of the probationary period, trainings, etc. So there's a load that we can get stuck into here on the bits and bobs in the background and the automations of what you have. What I'll do is I'll leave that to if anyone needs more information on Factorial, or if you want me to give a basic introduction on what a HRIS can do, whomever it might be, feel free to get in touch with myself or anyone from the team from Farnell Clarke as well. I'm going to stop sharing there and we can hop through.
Thank you. I think also if anyone wants a sort of a slightly longer demo, because I'm aware we kind of didn't leave you quite as much time as we should have done. So if anyone wants a kind of, personal demo, then that can be arranged as well. So thank you. That's brilliant. So we have got a couple of minutes for any sort of questions. I think we've had a couple put in the chat box.
Yeah, so the first one is I basically pay all my staff above national minimum wage, but I'm not planning on giving pay rises next year. Can I legally do this? So the first thing to check with that is, are you contractually obliged to give a pay rise? The majority of contracts have a clause which says we may review your pay on an annual basis, but that's the first base to cover, to check contractually, are you obliged to give a standard pay rise each year? More broadly, and it kind of goes back to what was discussed earlier around the increases in insurance contributions, and obviously decent hikes in national minimum wage. Legally, unless you're contractually bound, you don't need to apply a pay rise each year. It comes into a broader area though. So if that's the case, how do you engage your workers, and how can you be more creative with that? So is there enhancements in flexibility and flexible working that you can offer? Potentially things like extra holidays for people who've worked with you for a certain amount of time. So those kind of incentives. I mean, you've got your standard ones of perks in the office. So anything from fruit to chocolate, that kind of thing. The small things that create that culture. One of the biggest things that can create a real impact, real positive impact, is around things like thank you schemes and reward and recognition. We know that increasing salaries does have a massive impact on the bottom line. So where else can you engage and motivate and ultimately retain, the cost of recruitment, and the loss of knowledge is an important thing to mitigate against. The other question that we've got, Addy, I think it might be worth us picking this up separately in a bit more detail. You're running a trunk alongside company payroll within a hospitality business, and does holiday pay cover the trunk? So for those of you that aren't aware, it particularly affects the hospitality industry. The Tipping Act was put in place in October this year, start of October. I can't remember the exact date. A number of companies to comply with the requirements of tipping, which is fair allocation across workers, work with what's called a trunk master and run a trunk scheme. Tipping is outside of the holiday pay calculations, but I think it's quite a specific question, Addy, so I'm more than happy if you want to drop me an email or get in touch to have a more specific conversation around how you're running that. That's the questions. If anybody else has anything else that you think of during or after this, then obviously feel free to get in touch. Like Paula said, we do offer a free half-hour consultation to understand. We can go into depth on one subject that's particularly relevant to you, or just cover broadly what you're looking for. It's a no obligation meeting, and we like to offer it. All our contact details are below. Again, if anybody wants a more in-depth demo with Jack and the Factorial team, then get in touch and we can arrange that for you. It is a fantastic platform, and thanks, Jack, for that whistle-stop tour around it.
Yeah, I hope I didn't make anyone dizzy there, but no, for sure, if anyone wants to get in touch and hop through in more depth on what HR platform can do for you, be it us or someone else, more than happy again to hop onto that and have a chat.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's fantastic. As I say, we will be sending the recording slides and the compliance checklist over as well, and that will have our contact details on there. So get in touch if you need anything further. And thank you again for attending.
Thanks all. Have
Cheers,
a
everyone.
great rest of the day.